let's get back to your trap. I wandered off down the road here, and let's get back to your trap and tell me how it started. What?
Well, state of Washington went to ballot box biology probably in about 1998, something like that. They eliminated hound hunting. Then they eliminated cougar hunting. And then the next thing in 2000 was a gal named Lisa Watney introduced a bill to eliminate all body gripping devices in an attempt to eliminate trapping. And it passed. And so we were limited to trapping animals in box traps, which apparently they found that way more humane than a conibear. And so at that time, I started looking at Alaska, because trapping is important enough to me that I would move to still be able to trap. But I was able to learn how to start trapping with bobcats and with cage traps and that. And I did get some beaver traps, and I found that the beaver caught in a handcock or in a colony swim through trap, they get damaged fur and that. And it was kind of a bad deal, but nevertheless, I still wanted to trap. And, muskrats were something that we had in the central part of the state, that we had some high numbers. Prior to this, there was 10,000 muskrats a year caught out of the Moses Lake area. And then after a few years, after not having any trapping there, the numbers went down to about 2,000 and that. So, but I still wanted to trap. And so I started trying to figure out, okay, how do I catch a muskrat without gripping his body in any way? And so I started designing these traps and putting trail cameras right below my house where I lived. And when I was in Washington, I had a slough that was down below the house where it's just easy to walk down there and check my cameras each day and see how the trap was working. I had several designs. It took me about a year to get a design that I thought worked. And then after I had a lot of videotapes and that, and figured, okay, now I'm getting, if they get in the trap, they're not getting out, and I'm getting them caught. And at the same time, I discovered with that if I put the bars 1.25 inches apart, that the small and kit muskrats could escape unharmed. And so once again, Lisa Watney forced me into a situation where now I had a better means of trapping and way more productive. I used to be able to catch about 60 muskrats a day on footholds. And when I told my son, he lived in Montana at that time, I said, hey, if you're not doing anything this winter, come back, I want to test these traps. I made 80 traps and we went down there, and we were catching 120 muskrats a day. And it was just doubled my production. So in Lisa Watney's attempt to limit my trapping, she made me more efficient. So I think I mentioned it earlier to you that I wanted to name it the Lisa Watney 2000, because Lisa Watney is the one that interjected the bill, and it was the year 2000. So I figured that was an appropriate name for it, was the Lisa Watney 2000.
That works. I'm curious about this. I'm curious how they sold this to the voters, because whether they go in your trap or whether they get in a foothold, jump off of a float, they drowned. It's over quickly. I don't see the separation here. Do you?
Yeah, there's no logic. It's just like there's no thought process there. It was an emotional deal. Anytime you go away from scientific management to ballot box management, you got to remember, these people, their only biological training has been watching Gentle Ben on TV. So you got people making decisions on how wildlife should be managed with absolutely no knowledge or understanding of it. And so it's what you end up with.
And then when you get down to the point where you say to them, well, yes, but, and they talk about, well, yeah, but the animal that's his home, and you're invading and all that. And you point out that no matter where you live in the world, an animal used to live there. And then they just turn a blind eye. It's like that. It doesn't affect them, so it's not important, right?
Yeah. Logic is not something that applies.
No. So you have two models. And I want to
Yeah.
say, if anybody would like to see how these work, we have an episode on it this year. I'm actually editing right now on it on Trapping ATV. But we also, if you go to our YouTube, we have a out of the box. The day I opened them, put them together, and looked at them, shows how they work. And that the two different models are. You call the one the inverted door, and that's the one that they can come out of. The little ones come out of. And the other one is a treadle, where they step on a treadle. Once they go in, they step on a treadle.
Yeah, basically it's just a teeter totter that closes the door with the treadle. The other one is it's a bump bar that as they swim up to it, you'll find that a muskrat has no problem at all pushing his way through things. They're pushing their way through brush and grass and everything else all day long. So for them to push their way into that trap, I find that the muskrats will go into the inverted door easier than they will, which the treadle, they actually kind of have to crawl up on it, where I think they feel more comfortable staying in the water going into the inverted door. So you're going to catch them in both the traps. I think you'll catch them sooner in the inverted door, is what my experience has been.
Okay.
I also had one time I had an inverted door set, and all the carrots kept disappearing. And I thought, shit, what the hell's wrong with this trap? And so I put in a treadle trap there, and I caught all these rats that are about the size of a freaking hamster, a little bit bigger than a hamster. And I said, okay, my trap was working perfectly, and I overthought it.
Well, at the auction that just happened, all my muskrats sold, and the prices are up. Like, I mean, the good rats are, the 2 and 3 XLs were hitting $650, and which is getting where we want to be. But then my XS, my XS ones, my extra smalls, went $4 for $1. So I like the inverted door because I don't want to have any of those little tiny guys. I prefer to let them go and just keep the big ones. But you had a specific reason for making the second one, for making the treadle door that caught everything.
Well, because what happens is that a lot of muskrats caught now are animal damage control. The majority of them probably actually are, if truth be known. And, people don't want to they want to wipe them out. They've been digging tunnels into their dam or doing whatever damage they're doing. Or, when somebody has a boat down on the dock and the muskrats eat the rubber boot around the outdrive and the boat sinks. And I thought, now they don't want to kill just the big ones. They want to kill all of them.
It became personal right there.
Yeah. Sunk their $80,000 boat, and they have a different opinion on muskrats now. Yeah. That every muskrat should be dead at that point.
Tell them that their boat's floating in the muskrat's water, that they shouldn't worry about it. The muskrat was there first, right? Yeah. But you're right, though. We do have those situations, like in the Netherlands. I mean, the country is kept above water by dike systems. Well, they took muskrats over there in the 30s. Now they have a program where they kill over 400,000 a year, these muskrats. And then because they don't believe in being able to use a fur for anything useful, they just incinerate them. So you explain that one, how that is a PETA thing to do, but it's exactly what you say. They're very, very destructive, and they carry disease. There isn't an animal out there that doesn't need to be controlled. So you developed one that would wipe out everything.
Yeah, that was the treadle. Basically, all it is a teeter-totter. As they go in, reach a certain point, the teeter-totter closes the door. Once they're standing on the teeter-totter, there's no way they can get out, because there's no way they can get to the door without the door being closed. So, it's basically, if they're in there, it's almost 100% catch. I don't know if that. And one of the other neat things about these traps is that I have never caught a duck in one, and I don't know of anybody that's ever caught a duck. So you don't have an issue with waterfowl of any kind. And so there's several advantages to it. The disadvantages, in comparison to a dozen foothold traps, and the cost of my traps is tremendously different. But it takes a lot of work to make them, and that. I've got a lot of people that I've bought, that I've sold traps to, and they've continually bought more and more of them. And so, tells me that they're still working good for them. So.
Well, I did a really neat study with, like I said, this spring, and I as years have gone on, I have quit trapping rats in the spring, just because I know that it's a low shot number, and usually by the time the ice goes here, they're starting to rip one another apart, right? Because of breeding season. So I you sent me one of each model, and I set them up on the one lake, and and I caught rats and all that. And then the next lake I moved to, I thought, well, I should compare. So I set 11 floats that had two 1.5 long spring footholds on. So I had 22 out there, and I set the two traps that you sent me. And I forget whether it was 3 nights or 4 nights. I'd have to look back at my records, but I ended up catching 3 rats in those 22. So one a night for 22 footholds, and I ended up catching, I think, 17 total in your 2 traps. You know, well, I had to check it out. Like, because spring is never usually a good time for rat trapping, but I found it really interesting anyway, and they worked really well. I don't know if my extra small problem went away, because of course all rats in the spring are big. But
Yeah.
But you don't have any of those issues with ducks or with I didn't have any problems with, like, I never had a mink eat one, which was something new. Usually every muskrat season you lose a couple to mink. They'll dive down, find them hanging there, whatever, pack them back up onto the top, on get them up on the float and eat them. Those are tough critters, those mink are. Like, they're not even an aquatic animal yet. They're not made to be aquatic. They don't have webbing in their feet or anything else. And yet they when you watch them swim, they don't even swim well. But have you ever watched on YouTube? You ever watched them swim after trout and that? And it's like, he's like struggling to get down there. He's going to drown on the way, you think. And then he gets a hold of a trout as big as him, They're a fascinating critter. You guys must trap a bunch of those in Alaska.
Well, I have never been a mink trapper, and apparently I'm still not a mink trapper. The kids in town here catch more mink than I catch, but there's so many mink here. They should be like trapping muskrats, and yet I have a terrible time catching these mink. I catch mink. I'm not saying I don't catch them, and I just think they should be like trapping muskrats, but they don't respond to bait. Very, very poor, because every time the tide goes out, the dinner table's set, they go down there and they eat in 15 minutes, and they got a full belly. So I found that their distance they travel from the den is about 100 yards. Where you think a mink, probably where you're at, they're traveling miles at night.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
No,
Yep.
These things are traveling 100 yards. So you've got a pretty narrow spot you've got to catch them, but they're traveling that distance every time, but they have no interest in bait. So you go to all blind sets. And so what I ended up, being the most successful, they don't want to push their way through a conibear trigger. And so I took the conibear triggers off and kind of inverted the trap and put a pan type metal pan on it. And if it's exposed, they won't jump on it. But if you can blend that in, it's fairly effective. But I've gone to a lot of work trying to figure out how to make these things into muskrats, because there's hundreds of the things. You talk about, in the day when they were trapping a lot here, there was guys that catch 600 and 800 mink, and huge numbers of mink here. But boy, they're just a different mink than what I've ever was accustomed to. I've only lived here permanently in Alaska for 5 years, although I started trapping up here just shortly after 2000, when they banned trapping in the lower 48, and I've been trapping up here for basically 20 years. And
are they
the
larger?
mink have never, what?
Are they larger than the mink that you'd find same
The
animal?
The pine marten are, though. Pine marten from the Selkirk range are freaking huge. And you mentioned the fat on the pine marten. An interesting thing about these pine marten here is they've got fat like a mink almost.
Really?
And they're nearly twice the size of the marten I got out of the Selkirk range. Uh, they're both Americanas. They're not Carinas. They're Americanas here, and then they're Americanas in
Well,
the Selkirk range as well.
and here's the fascinating thing. I'm showing how we skin and flesh mink. I get all these queries and conversations that with people from back in Ontario and east back there. Their mink don't need to be you don't have to put on a board. They don't have that fat under the saddle or anything else.
Oh, these are real fat here, especially the big males. They're just really grease balls, but they have so much to eat here, and the mink per square mile is phenomenal. Like I said, I don't think they travel more than 100 yards from their den, and they got certain places they go down to the beach to eat, and I think they get their belly full in half hour or whatever and turn around and go back up and lay down again.
Well, half of my mink every year are caught in a marten box. They climb the tree and get into a marten box. The other half are caught on sitting a box with a conibear on the beaver dam. And if I get 400 or 500 muskrat in the fall, I just chop them in half and I dump the guts out of the half into a bucket. Well, that's all my mink bait, and I'll just pack a big wad of those guts into the back of a box and put a trap in front of it, and that's sitting on all of any place where I cross a waterway, or and lots of times I know where most of these places are just from being on the trap line for so long, because you would never know that water even ran there, but the mink and the otter travel there every year because there's water that oozes from one spot to another, and that's the trickle that's going through, right? But you don't know it, they know it, so you got to pay attention to your animals. You're in Wrangell, Alaska, right?
Yes. Yep. That halfway down British Columbia, on that tip of ground of Alaska that hangs halfway down British Columbia. You're exactly 1,200 miles due east of me. And when I'm in my place in Saco, Montana, you're 1,200 miles due north of me. When you mentioned about the muskrat traps, I was just chomping at the bit thinking, okay, I've got 200 of these traps. Maybe Rich will call me up and bring your 200 traps. We're going to trap muskrats. You'll find out what skinning muskrats is like, to where your hands get so sore that you think, okay, I've caught enough muskrats. So,
well, I tell you, if we didn't have the crazy COVID thing going on and the border closed, we'd have been on one another's trap line for sure already. You must have, and by the way, I'll never forget the idiot that allows you guys to have that panhandle in rather than BC have it. I think it's Seward. I can blame Seward, can't I? They didn't think he was too bright either at the time.
That's true. Stewart's icebox.
Yeah, his Seward's Folly, it was called for forever. You have like river or ocean otter, sea otter, right?
Yes.
They're very large. They got to be like 3 times 60, 70 pounds.
Yes, correct. And one of the amazing things I found out about them, I have several native friends here that are able to harvest them. And one guy, he makes quite a bunch of stuff out of them. He makes, well, let me see. Oh, just a second. Okay, this is a sea otter hat here. This sea otter here, and then this is a nice seal right here.
Oh yeah,
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But the natives here are able to utilize the seal and the sea otter, and that. So
seal is one of the furs that absolutely amazes me, because it's way softer and much nicer than I thought it was. I always thought they were kind of bristly, right? But
yeah, well, they are a little bit. It's completely waterproof too, though.
Yeah.
What I was starting to allude to is the interesting thing about the sea otter is they're born in the water and never leave the water. And so their environment is exactly the same, and they're prime year round.
That's fascinating.
So, we always think, I found that really interesting, that the sea otter, basically their environment never changes, maybe 3 degrees or something. And so they're prime year round.
Well, I understand that the reduced harvest and all that has been gigantically successful bringing their population back. But
no, we've gone to the other side of that dramatically. You know,
don't you hate that when that happens, when we never have an endpoint, and when we can say that we're recovered, and the same thing's happening with the grizzly bear right now in Alberta. You know, we're at that point, and nobody ever thought we'd get to this point, I guess. You know, but now what? Now do we open the hunting season again, or whatever? There has to be some hard and fast numbers.
Yeah. At what point do we go back to scientific management? Okay,
exactly.
You know, they did. You know, in the Marine Mammal Act, they determined that the carrying capacity of sea otter was to be 20,000 sea otter in Southeast Alaska. We currently have over 55,000, you know, so it's basically destroying the ecosystem. You know, communities like Cake and that had $1 million crab fishery. They can't even find a crab to eat out there now. It's non-existent, you know.
Because of the otter.
I mean, yeah, because of the sea otter. I know my son has a steelhead guiding business, and many of the creeks that he goes up had some really good clam digging. And they'd stop and dig clams when they came back down. And, you know, when the sea otters found it, it looks like somebody had been in there with a backhoe, and you can't find a clam. They get every single one of them. And, you know, the damage to the ecosystem is just tremendous with these things. And, you know, we have a crab fishery right here in Wrangell, but unfortunately, all of the crab fishermen and all the other communities all end up here because it's the only place that the sea otters are not, because the sea otters require kelp beds to sleep in. But we've got the Stikine River plus a bunch of other rivers that come in, the Bradfield, a bunch of other rivers that come in here. And I think that's what helps hold the kelp down, as well as the sea otters don't like the fresh water. Apparently, that's what I understand. And so for some reason, they just don't come back here. And so we still have crab here, but it's the only place in Southeast Alaska, basically, that there is, because the sea otters have wiped out everything else. So now we're overfishing the crab here. That's at least in my opinion, anyway.
That's amazing. We have the same thing happening on the East Coast with the seals. You know, now there's no cod left because the seal population are so huge. They're, you know, they quit the harvesting of it. First they quit the harvesting of the young ones, the white ones, and then after, which led to some interesting conversations about what an ermine was. we show a trapping show with a white, of course, with a white weasel, and people would say, "Well, those are babies. You can't kill them, can you?" Yeah, not understanding that it wasn't a baby martin; it was a total different critter. But it was a great opportunity to teach anyway. But they back there now they've got so many of the seal that it's done the same thing to the cod population, and there's no cod fishery anymore. I first knew about how the otter were getting so popular, and that was, it came up on I was working on my YouTube channel, and somebody posted up a picture of people kayaking, and the guy's in a kayak, and the otter comes up and crawls up on the kayak. Well, that thing was gigantic. They said 70 pounds, and I believed it, and it was just hugely fat. But I mean, it was like he was going to sink his kayak, and then it went in and talked about how, you know, that they had a whole herd of them that lived in this one little particular bay or whatever it was, and I was just fascinated by it. They have the softest fur on the planet, right? Like the most.
Actually, what's interesting about it is it has 900 to 1 million hair follicles per square inch. And that's what allows them to be in the water and actually never get wet to the hide, because the water can't penetrate it. A beaver is about 100,000 hair follicles per square inch, but he's basically more time out of the water than he is in the water.
Yeah.
So he does not have that requirement to have that many hair follicles. But if you take and feel a sea otter or a plucked and sheared beaver, a plucked and sheared beaver is actually quite a bit softer.
Right, because no guard hairs, right?
Yeah.
I know that, I think it goes river otter, and then for density, and then fur density you're talking about, and then chinchilla. Chinchilla is about 600,000, and then the sea otter, and the sea otter's in a class all of its own. But since they never come to shore, then harvest of them, it must be all by hunting.
Yeah, but and they float like a bobber. So it's not like if you shoot a beaver, you got a few seconds to get a beaver before he sinks. In the case of the sea otter, you shoot them and, they're going to be floating forever. They're not going to sink. So
because they're so fat.
Yeah, my friend that does the seal hat and does the other thing, he uses a 204 and just shoots them in the head. And after he's got a bunch of them floating around out there, then he goes and gathers them up and comes back and skins them and ships them off to the tannery.
Seriously?
Yeah.
How many is he allowed to take?
He can take as many as they wants. However, they need to be killing at least 5,000 of them just to kill that year's production. And the natives so far, I don't think they've killed much more than about 1,200 is the most they've ever killed in 1 year. And usually they're around 800 or 900 is all that the natives have harvested. And I don't know why, because I think he sold his last blanket for $10,000 that he made.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a tremendous opportunity. And the interesting thing about it, in the Marine Mammal Act, the state was to take it over when they were recovered. But it's so political that the game department doesn't want to do their job because of the political pressure they would get, is what it appears to me anyway.
Yeah.
Because right in the Marine Mammal Act, it says that the game department was to take over scientific management of the sea otter when they reach carrying capacity. Well, we perhaps passed that quite some time ago, and the state has done nothing. And we keep bugging them about it, but they just don't want the political flack of and it's such an opportunity. The game department has an opportunity to actually manage it through a tagging. You could buy a sea otter tag for $500. They could easily sell them. They're already in financial trouble anyway. They have a resource that is going to end up dying off if they do nothing. So these sea otter are all going to die. They basically make 100-year cycles, just like all animals cycle in that. And one of the things, I had one guy here from British Columbia that was here staying with us, and he was talking about they dug up some of the mittens, the native dump sites, right. And they found that there was 100 years of having clamshells in the dump sites and 100 years without having clams in the dump sites. And they figured that was the cycle of the sea otter, was 100-year cycles. So these sea otters are going to die off if we continue to do nothing, and they'll make a big wide swings like they always do, like every other animal. So.
Yeah, but the worst part is then when they start to die off, then they'll point to it to being something else. They'll say that it's halibut fishermen or that it's pleasure boaters or whatever, and they'll try and keep their thumb on the scale to artificially influence that population, when nature just gets to a point where it's boom and bust, boom and bust, yep. Boom and bust. There's no in between. We can clip some of those tops off a little bit, if we take and manage it a little bit. You can't, when people are being ruled by emotion, the Disneyfication of the world, there's just no making them understand that.
Well, it's just ballot box biology or scientific biology, and they're just the majority of the people now prefer the ballot box biology rather than scientific biology.
I cannot believe that they would not, like, a $10,000 for a blanket. Oh my God. Like, oh my God. You have stepped aside.
That hat
What's that?
I was just saying that the hat I just showed you is $550. That you could probably make probably 10 of those at least, probably more than that out of a sea otter. So I mean, it's a huge potential for revenue for the entire state, and yet they just ignore it.
I wonder why. I can't figure that one.
Back to our original comment about emotion versus logic.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd still be illogical and wealthy, which you don't hear about from trappers very much, but anymore. But you've taken a different approach. This is your first shop in Wrangell, Alaska. And how do people find it if they want to find you online?
Fursalaska.com.
Okay. And you have stepped sideways from the traditional method of catching fur and sending it to auction or selling it to a fur buyer. You've decided to take it right through the end and make your own
Yep.
products out of everything. So we were just before we went on the air, you talked about what a beaver was worth to you. You want to explain
beaver's
that
worth beaver's worth about $300 to me. I make beaver tail coasters out of the tail. I
Show
sell
those.
a set of, okay, bear with me a second.
Well, Mike chases that down. That is cool. Like I've seen beaver tail wallets, and I've seen some a little bit of beaver tail gun scabbards. But this the beaver tail coasters is really cool.
Oh, basically, I just skin out the tail at the same time. I've started case skinning my beaver, and so a case skin beaver. So now I'm getting the tails tanned for free. They charge me the same thing for tanning the beaver with the tails on as they do. So now for making fur products, some of the products I make, I use the belly fur, so I split it up the back. Some of the products I make, I skin them, split them up the belly so I can use the back. So I have an option to go either direction. If I'm making a scarf or a headband, the belly fur makes a better scarf or a headband. So I split them up the back. So I got $50 in the tails to start with. And then I've also sell the beaver teeth for $5 a piece. So I got $20 in beaver teeth.
So how did you do that tail? Did you?
Okay, when you skin it, you're just going down one leg.
Oh, I see. It's half on the front and half on the back. Yeah.
And so I get a set of $50 for a set of coasters out of the tail. And then I make whatever I want to make out of it, whether it be these, I chop them up and make these out of it, or I make the hats I've got up above up there. I think you can, there's a hats right up there.
Yeah.
I make those out of them as well too. So, it takes some extra work. You got some extra time into it, but each beaver I catch, I figure is a $300 beaver. So it's back to making it worthwhile, and at least in my way of thinking anyway. So it rains a fair amount here in Wrangell. So if I got a rainy day, I can come in the store and make, $500 or $1,000 worth of product in a day. So.
Well, that's fascinating. I really like the use for the beaver tail. That's cool. And the way that they end up tanning it, it does. I guess it's no harder for them to tan that way than
no.
But leaving it all together, that's
so interesting thing I found about case skinning beaver is they're much easier to flesh and they're a little bit harder to clean skin. Normally I've always clean skinned beaver, but when I went to case skinning them, I found that it was easier to rough skin them and then flesh them on a beam, just like you're fleshing them on an otter board. And so then when you go to board it is where you really save the time. It takes about 2 minutes to board a beaver. You pull them over a wooden, basically the same as like a big mink board or whatever with a belly. Actually, I use 2 belly boards on it in order to split where the tail is, because I lay a piece of wire over the tail and then just staple the tail down so it stays flat.
Yeah.
And and that's where you really save. I used to always figure a beaver was an hour. That's all it amounted to. As long as you accept it's going to take you an hour to put up a beaver, you're good. Well, it shaved about 15 minutes off of that because that's about the time it takes to board. Or in my case, I use always hoop beaver on wire on hoops.
Yeah.
And so, it basically cut 15 minutes of beaver handling off. So instead of an hour, I figure 45 minutes now.
That is fascinating, though. I mean, I have case skinned beaver. I've never done the tail like you do that, but I'm gonna. But I've case skinned them, and I liked case skinning them just because it was so easy. Fleshing was that much easier.
Yeah,
like I found because you'd flesh it in like an otter or whatever, except without having the tail problem that you have with an otter. You can flesh an otter pretty dang fast as compared to fleshing just a regular beaver. When you case skin them though and get them over top that beam, like you can make some pretty good time.
Yeah,
know?
that's why I say it cut a good 15 minutes off of my beaver handling.
Right. Right. Huh.
And then it gives me so many more options too, you know, as far as when I'm making product out of them, you know, I can choose to split it. And occasionally I even split them down the side if I want on the hats to get that ear flap to be right out of the center of the back, which makes a nice looking hat. So you can position it where you want it and what you want to make out of it.
Well, that is very important for you because you make your own product too. You're right from the trap to the cash register, right?
Yeah. What I refer to as fleecing the liberals as they come in the store.
I had a guy contact me from Florida and he wanted a lynx. And of course, we have lots and lots of lynx. I have lots of tan lynx down there. But by the time it's $365 just to deal with the US Fish and Wildlife to send a lynx to Florida. But by the time you're done with CITES and everything else, it was like $890 bill. And then and he hasn't paid me for the lynx, that he hasn't paid me, but he was a Democrat. And this was just this was just before the election. and I had to be so careful how I talked and all that. And then he eventually brought it up, and I says, I don't think we're going to get along very well if we start talking about this. But they were fascinated, and finally I said to him, I said, you're not my typical fan or viewer or people that want to buy fur from me, because you just being on that left side and all that. And he says, well, we're not all that way, But I should get a hold of him again and ask him how the gas prices are, or could he put up with a mean tweet every now and then now?
Yeah, I think our country is reaching levels of stupidity that I didn't really think was achievable. So
we had a minister in our government, which is, he's in the governing caucus. So he's a liberal, and he's the minister of who knows. They have so much stupidity. But he brought out a statement. He made a statement that all plastic was toxic, and all plastic should be carry special taxes on it, and because we got to go away from taxes. He would have been naked without glasses or a phone sitting there doing that tweet if plastic would have been outlawed. This is how stupid this guy is. Don't get me going. I'll be as bad as Dan Bongino. I'll be spitting on things.
I'll be right there with you.
Well, we should wrap this up. We've been at it an hour and a half, and this has been a great time. We have to get together.
Okay. Let me bring my 200 floating muskrat traps up. We better bring a couple skinners with us, though.
Yeah, exactly. One way, come trapping on the trap line. Come do muskrats. I got to come see you over there. I think I listened to a podcast you're on with Meat Eater, and you talked about that you actually use a jet boat to do most of your trapping on, because your rivers stay open. Not a jet boat, an airboat, entirely different. It's got an 0540 Lycoming aircraft engine on it. Right. And because our rivers, because of the climate that we have here, it oscillates between freezing and not freezing, and the rivers aren't solid enough to run a snowmobile up. So the airboat is neat because it runs in snow. I've never had it in very deep snow yet, but I think it will handle perfectly in deep snow, just as well as a 1.5 feet or 2 feet of snow. But handles wonderfully. And then if the ice breaks up from underneath you, you're a boat and it just heads right back. You just keep on going. And so it's I bet you have, it's expensive. Yeah, but I bet you have some stories. Oh my God, I can already picture this trip in my head. Because they steer kind of like a pinball, don't they? You just got to ricochet off stuff. No, that's not that way at all. But one thing it does do, if you get on a slab of ice, it'll want to drift sideways on you. The only thing you can do is turn it around and go backwards, basically just flip it around, but it'll flip around in its own length. I bet
And
there's a whole
so
story that in how you figured that one out.
yeah, yeah, there are actually several stories. The one thing that's really bothersome is that in the rivers that I trap, my in reach, as far as I can tell, my in reach doesn't even get out. So I carry a rubber raft with me, that little tiny rubber raft that I figure if I get some open leads and that I've got to get over or through or whatever, or you'd be able to just drag down to walk downstream and hopefully be able to get down the back to the ocean. And then from the when I get to the mouth of the river, then I've still got another 5 miles I got to paddle to get to my trapping cabin. And my trapping cabin's 42 miles from town and that. So, but yeah, but I've got an in reach, and if I do get in trouble with a broken leg or something, hitting the in reach come and get me button, there might not be anybody coming to get me.
So tell everybody how they can find your YouTube. You have some great trail cam videos of your traps in action. I didn't get any trail cam this year because we had waves like this, and I lost 2 cameras as a matter of fact. But anyway, what YouTube can they find you on?
Well, nongriptraps.com, and then on the site for where we sell the traps, there's also a bunch of the video that I put on there so people can see how they operate and that. Some of them have got a cutaway so you can see the muskrat going in. I've wired the trap stationary so you can actually see the muskrat and how the teeter-totter works and that. And then I've got videos of the small muskrats squeezing out through the bars and getting out and that. And so you can see what's going on with it and that, and how the bump bar works and that type of thing. So
it's a great idea. I can see it being huge for especially the treadle one for golf courses, that kind of stuff, where they really hate muskrats.
The real advantage to these traps is for the ability to just take and bait the trap and throw it in the water. You don't have to locate the runs. You don't have to locate the feed beds. None of that's even required. So the ADC guys, or even individuals that have a pond, I sell a lot of traps to individuals that have no trapping experience at all. I provide a DVD with each one of the traps that, gives you a little bit of information of maintenance and a little bit of information of how to set them and that. And basically you just bait them and throw them in the water and, tie them off so they don't float away is about the only requirement.
Oh, I know they work. They are so easy. They work so well, and like you say, it is great for people to have their own pond. That kind of stuff. I'm impressed with them, and I really recommend anybody that's interested should go watch your trail cam videos on them. That they work really good there. Fursalaska.com is how they get a hold of your fur shop.
Yep.
Okay. And you have lots of good stuff. I know we have lots. I'm not sure what the deal would be if people could try and bring that stuff into Canada, but I know that the folks in the States that watch the podcast that will can reach you and get your product. This has been a blast, Bud, and I really want to do it again. And thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Rich. I greatly appreciate all you've done for trapping in the industry. I can't thank you enough.
It started out with me trying to pick a fight, but it kind of went the other way on me.
Well,
all right, folks. We'd like to thank you for spending your time with us, and maybe we'll see you down the line.